An independent editorial defense analysis focused on Australia's strategic environment.
The strategic geography of the Australian continent has historically dictated a maritime-first defense posture. It was predicated on a simple assumption: any credible threat must traverse the archipelago to the north before reaching the mainland. For decades, the Royal Australian Navy served as the primary instrument of this strategy. They were tasked with interception and sea control far beyond the littoral zone. However, the publication of the 2024 National Defense Strategy signals a fundamental inversion of this logic. The emergence of long-range land-based fires suggests that the Australian Army is transitioning. It is moving from a force designed for expeditionary counterinsurgency to a primary node in a maritime denial complex. This shift represents not merely a technical upgrade. It is a systemic reorganization of how Canberra conceptualizes the defense of its northern approaches. Effectively, it is tasking land forces with sinking ships. Central to this transformation is the calculated reduction of the Land 400 Phase 3 Infantry Fighting Vehicle program. The procurement of AS-21 Redbacks was slashed from 450 to just 129 units. This decision is often reduced in public discourse to a mere budgetary exercise. Yet it reflects a deeper doctrinal prioritization. By diverting capital from heavy armor to the guided weapons and explosive ordnance enterprise, planners have implicitly acknowledged a new reality. The decisive phase of a potential conflict will likely occur before an adversary can establish a beachhead. And this renders heavy mechanized maneuver warfare secondary to the capacity to strike targets at ranges exceeding 500 kilometers. This trade-off accepts a localized risk in ground combat capacity to secure a strategic advantage in the sea-air gap. The operational credibility of this strategy rests heavily on the technical evolution of the precision strike missile. Specifically, the Increment 2 variant. Unlike the unitary warheads of the past, designed for static targets, the integration of a multi-mode seeker transforms the platform. It changes HIMARS from conventional artillery into a mobile coastal defense battery. From a cost exchange perspective, the asymmetry is stark. A salvo of missiles costing several million US has the potential to mission-kill surface combatants valued in the billions. This creates a formidable economic and tactical dilemma for an adversary. It forces them to operate further from the Australian coast or risk high-value assets against relatively expendable munitions. The strategic intent here is deterrence by denial. It creates a zone where an adversary can operate but cannot control. However, the deployment of such a system introduces complex logistical constraints. The vastness of northern Australia, often cited as a strategic depth, acts as a double-edged sword. The concept of employing HIMARS in a shoot-and-scoot capacity relies on rapid displacement via C-130 Hercules or C-17 Globemaster aircraft. While the platforms are air-portable, the sustained operation of a distributed missile network requires a robust supply chain. Fuel and ammunition logistics in the remote north remain tenuous. The infrastructure required to support high-tempo reload operations across dispersed locations introduces a vulnerability. These logistics hubs themselves become prime targets for adversary long-range strikes. This exposes a critical gap in the architecture of the Northern Shield, the lack of integrated air and missile defense. While the Army has invested heavily in the offensive spear, the defensive shield remains thin. Once a HIMARS battery fires, its thermal and electronic signature is revealed. Without a robust layer of medium-range air defense, like the NASAMS or future directed energy systems to protect these firing points, The launchers become highly vulnerable to counter-battery fire or loitering munitions. The assumption that mobility alone equals survivability is a dangerous gamble in an age of persistent satellite surveillance. Furthermore, this pivot must be contextualized within the broader framework of the U.S. alliance. It is no coincidence that the Australian Army's restructuring mirrors the U.S. Marine Corps' Force Design 2030. The U.S. Marines have similarly divested of tanks to focus on littoral regiments armed with anti-ship missiles. By aligning its equipment and doctrine with the U.S. Marine Rotational Force Darwin, Australia is ensuring seamless interoperability. This creates a unified, interchangeable magazine of munitions across the alliance. It allows a U.S. HIMARS launcher to fire an Australian missile and vice versa. This interchangeability complicates an adversary's calculus. They are no longer facing two distinct forces, but a single distributed kill web. Yet, the effectiveness of this land-based maritime strike depends entirely on the integrity of the kill chain. A missile with a 500-kilometer range is useless without a sensor network capable of detecting targets at that distance. Consequently, the HIMARS acquisition cannot be viewed in isolation. It must be analyzed in conjunction with the F-35A Lightning II, the P-8A Poseidon, and uncrewed platforms like the MQ-4C Triton. The reliance on off-board sensors implies that the Army is no longer an independent maneuver force. It is now a kinetic effector within a joint fires network. This integration demands a level of data fusion that the Australian Defence Force is still maturing. If the data link is severed by electronic warfare or cyber disruption, the long-range strike capability degrades rapidly. The industrial dimension presents another critical vulnerability. The current reliance on the United States for the supply of precision strike missiles creates a dependency. This could prove critical during a high-intensity conflict where global supply chains are contested. While the establishment of sovereign manufacturing aims to develop capability, the timeline for domestic production lags behind the immediate requirement. Until Australia achieves a degree of magazine depth through domestic production, the sustainability of the Northern Shield remains contingent on external logistics corridors. This pivot to land-based fires also serves as a necessary interim solution to a looming naval capability gap. With the Anzac-class frigates aging and the Hunter-class still years away, the Royal Australian Navy faces a period of reduced hull availability. In this interim, land-based anti-ship missiles offer a way to project power into the maritime domain without requiring a physical ship presence. This suggests a doctrinal acceptance that sea control may be unattainable in a contested environment. Instead, the focus has narrowed to sea denial. Ultimately, the restructuring of the Australian Army around the HIMARS complex represents a gamble. It is a wager on technology and geography over mass and maneuver. It assumes that future conflicts will be decided by precision and range rather than the attrition of armored formations. While this aligns with global trends in modern warfare, it leaves the Australian Defence Force with a highly specialized structure. The capability is potent but fragile. It is reliant on a pristine sensor network, a secure supply of sophisticated munitions, and the ability to maintain logistics in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. The success of the Northern Shield will depend not just on the performance of the missiles. It will depend on the resilience of the entire system that supports them. From the factory floor in the United States to the data links in the stratosphere, and finally to the remote dirt airstrips of the Northern Territory.